The champagne flute slipped from my fingers and shattered against the marble floor of Richard Calloway's penthouse. Not because I was clumsy. Not because I was drunk. But because his words, spoken loudly enough for 47 people to hear, hit me like a physical force I hadn't braced for. Let me be honest with everyone here tonight. Richard raised his glass toward the glittering Manhattan skyline, his custom tuxedo catching the chandelier light. His eyes, however, were fixed on me with the particular cruelty of a man who had been planning this moment. Some people in this company work hard. Some people build things. And some people, he paused, letting the silence do its work, are simply taking up space. Collecting paychecks they haven't earned. Warming chairs that better people deserve. 47 faces turned toward me. I knew because I counted them. One by one. The way you count things when your mind needs something to hold on to while your chest is being hollowed out in public. My name is Elena Vasquez. I'm 34 years old. And this is the story of how the worst night of my professional life became the last night Richard Calloway ever held power over anyone. I had worked at Calloway and Associates for 6 years. 6 years of arriving before anyone else. 6 years of staying after the cleaning crew had already gone home. 6 years of turning Richard's half-formed ideas into polished presentations that won clients worth millions, then watching him accept the applause without once gesturing toward the woman who had built every slide, researched every figure, and rehearsed every talking point with him at 11 p.m. the night before. I was Richard's senior strategy analyst. On paper. In reality, I was the invisible architecture behind everything he presented to the world. My mother called it loyal. My best friend Dara called it something else entirely. You are building his house, Dara had told me once, over coffee in my small but carefully decorated apartment on the Upper West Side. Brick by brick. And he gets to live in it while you sleep outside. I had laughed it off then. I always laughed it off. I came from nothing in a way that Manhattan rarely forgives. My parents had emigrated from Mexico City before I was born, settling in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx where my father worked double shifts at a printing press and my mother cleaned offices in Midtown. I had earned my way to Columbia on academic scholarships and sheer refusal to accept the ceiling people kept trying to place over my head. I understood, perhaps too well, the seductive logic of gratitude. Richard had hired me when others hadn't. Richard had given me a title when I had no alumni network, no family connections, no inherited credibility. For a long time I had confused opportunity with loyalty. I had spent 6 years paying a debt that was never real. What Richard saw when he looked at me was a workhorse who didn't know her worth. What he failed to see was everything else. The party was at his Central Park penthouse. An annual tradition, he called it, though tradition was perhaps too generous a word for what was, in practice, a theatrical performance of his own success. 80-person guest list. Catered by one of the city's most photographed restaurants. A string quartet in the corner that no one listened to because Richard's voice filled every available space in every room he occupied. I had almost not come. 3 days before the party, I had been sitting in my apartment reviewing documents that had nothing to do with Calloway and Associates. Documents that my personal attorney, a woman named Constance Park who had worked with me quietly for 8 months, had flagged as ready for my signature. You don't have to wait, Constance had said over the phone that evening. Her voice was precise and unhurried, the voice of someone who had seen powerful people collapse before and found it neither surprising nor particularly dramatic. Everything is in place. You could move this week. Not yet, I had said. I want to give him one more chance to be decent. Constance had been quiet for a moment. Elena. In my experience, people who have never been decent don't become decent because you give them more time. I had known she was right. I had gone to the party anyway. Perhaps part of me needed to see it clearly. Needed to watch him without the filter of gratitude or professional obligation. Needed to stand in his penthouse surrounded by his hand-selected audience and see exactly what he was, not my boss, not my benefactor, but a man who had been diminishing me so gradually that I had nearly accepted it as weather. Something inevitable. Something that simply happened to people like me. The party was already in full swing when I arrived. I wore a black dress, simple, well cut, chosen because I had learned long ago that invisibility was its own kind of power. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing tray, exchanged pleasantries with two colleagues who seemed genuinely pleased to see me, and positioned myself near the floor-to-ceiling windows where the city spread out below like an offering. Richard found me within 20 minutes. Elena. He said my name the way he always said it, like a minor inconvenience he had learned to tolerate. Glad you could make it. His eyes swept my dress with the evaluative gaze of someone checking whether I was appropriately dressed for a room I didn't fully belong in. Whatever his verdict, he moved on without sharing it. I watched him work the room after that. Shaking hands. Telling stories. Positioning himself at the center of every cluster of guests like a planet around which smaller bodies had no choice but to orbit. I watched him and I felt something shift in me, not anger exactly, but clarity. The particular lucidity that comes when you finally see a thing for what it is and can no longer pretend otherwise. He had been building towards something all evening. I could feel it the way you feel a storm before it arrives, a change in atmospheric pressure, a stillness that isn't peace. He clinked his glass with a knife at 9:47 p.m. The room quieted. He began speaking about the company's record year. About growth. About leadership. About the kind of team building that separated exceptional organizations from mediocre ones. It was the same speech he gave every year, repackaged with updated numbers and a few new jokes that landed with the laughter of people who needed to laugh. And then he pivoted. But I want to be real with you all tonight, he said, his voice dropping into the register he used when he wanted to appear candid. Because real leadership means acknowledging what isn't working. It means having the courage to name the weak links, not to be cruel, but to be honest. 47 people in a penthouse above Central Park went very still. Some people in this company work hard. His eyes found mine across the room. Some people build things. And some people are simply taking up space. The champagne flute slipped from my fingers. I heard it shatter as if from a great distance. I heard the sharp intake of breath from the woman standing nearest to me, Margaret from accounting, who had always been kind, who looked at me now with an expression of helpless horror. I heard Richard continue speaking, something about accountability, something about standards, but his words had become a low-frequency hum beneath the sound of my own heartbeat. What I remember most clearly is the stillness of my own hands. After the initial shock. After the flute hit the floor. My hands were perfectly, absolutely still. I looked at Richard Calloway, his tuxedo, his champagne, his penthouse, his audience, and I felt something I had not expected to feel. Relief. Because this was the moment I had, without fully realizing it, been waiting for. The moment when his mask slipped so completely that no version of gratitude or professionalism could ask me to pretend I hadn't seen it. I bent down. Picked up the largest piece of the broken flute from the marble floor. Placed it carefully on a nearby tray so no one would step on it. Then I straightened my dress, looked directly at Richard Calloway, and smiled. Not a performance. Not a response to an audience. A small, private smile that was just for him, a smile that said, very clearly, I know something you don't. I turned and walked toward the elevator. Behind me, I heard his voice resume, slightly louder now, slightly less certain, trying to recapture the room's attention. He didn't succeed. I know because Dara, who had been standing near the back and had witnessed everything, told me later that for the next 20 minutes, no one quite looked at Richard Calloway the way they had before. Something had shifted in that room, and everyone felt it, even if no one could name it. The elevator doors closed. I took out my phone and called Constance. I'm ready, I said. Move everything. Monday morning. Her response was immediate. Already on it. Get some rest, Elena. You're going to want to be sharp. I had started planning 14 months earlier. Not out of revenge, or at least, not entirely. Out of self-preservation. Out of the accumulating weight of watching my work presented as someone else's vision, my ideas credited to a room, my contributions dissolved into the institutional we that powerful people use to absorb the contributions of people they consider beneath them. It had started with a conversation. 14 months ago, I had been approached by a woman named Iris Chen at an industry conference in Chicago. Iris was the managing director of Meridian Capital Partners, a private equity firm that had been quietly building a portfolio in the strategy consulting sector. She was elegant, direct, and had apparently been watching Calloway and Associates from a distance for some time. "Your firm's client retention numbers are remarkable," she had said, over drinks in the hotel bar after the afternoon panels. "I've been trying to understand why. Most firms in your space plateau after year 3. Yours keeps growing." She had paused, watching me with calm, intelligent eyes. "I've been watching the presentations. Reading the strategic frameworks. I have a theory about why the firm succeeds." I had waited. "The work has a specific signature," she had said. "A particular way of framing problems that I don't see anywhere else in the industry. It's consistent across 5 years of client presentations." Another pause. "It doesn't match anything Richard Calloway has written or said publicly in any other context." Something had expanded in my chest in that moment. The feeling of being seen, after years of invisibility, is almost unbearable in its intensity. "I'd like to discuss what a different arrangement might look like for you," Iris had said simply. "If you were ever interested in exploring that." I had taken her card. I had not called her for 3 weeks. And then, on a Tuesday evening after Richard had presented a client strategy one had developed over 4 months as a framework the team has been developing, I had called Iris Chen and told her I was ready to talk. What followed was 14 months of meticulous, quiet preparation. With Iris's backing and Constance's legal precision, I incorporated a new consulting firm, Vasquez Strategic Partners, registered under a holding company that contained nothing connecting it publicly to my name. I spent evenings and weekends building the infrastructure, the systems, the processes, the proprietary methodology that had always lived in my head and in my work but had never formally belonged to me. More importantly, I had conversations. Careful, patient, relationship-building conversations with 7 of Calloway and Associates' most significant clients. Clients I had worked with directly for years. Clients who knew my voice, my thinking, my particular way of approaching their most complex problems. I didn't solicit them. I simply reconnected. Reminded them who I was. Let them remind themselves. By the Sunday morning after Richard's party, 3 of those clients had already signed letters of engagement with Vasquez Strategic Partners. The other 4 would follow within the week. Monday arrived the way consequential mornings always do, ordinary on the surface, quietly seismic beneath it. I dressed carefully. Not in black this time. A deep burgundy blazer over tailored ivory trousers. The kind of outfit that communicates, without announcement, that the person wearing it has somewhere important to be. I arrived at Calloway and Associates at 8:15 a.m., exactly when I always arrived. I said good morning to the receptionist. I made coffee. I sat at my desk. At 8:47 a.m., my resignation letter, formal, precise, effective immediately, landed in Richard's inbox, in the HR director's inbox, and in the inbox of every member of the board of directors. At 9:02 a.m., Iris Chen's firm issued a press release announcing the launch of Vasquez Strategic Partners and its strategic partnership with Meridian Capital. At 9:15 a.m., the first client call came, to Richard's direct line. Donovan Hartley, CEO of Hartley Brands and one of Calloway's flagship accounts for 4 years. I knew what that call contained because Donovan had told me the night before, during a brief and warm phone conversation, exactly what he intended to say. He was moving his account. He was moving it to me. And he wanted Richard to know that the decision had nothing to do with price. By 9:30 a.m., 2 more calls had come in. Same message. Different voices. I know the timeline precisely because Marcus, a junior analyst who sat near the executive suite and had always been quietly, carefully loyal to me, sent me a running update via text message from inside the building. 9:02, PR hit the wire. Office is buzzing. 9:17, RJC just got off the phone with Hartley. He looks like he sat on something. 9:31, 2 more client calls. His assistant is stress eating from the snack drawer. 9:44, he's asking where you are. HR director just went into his office. 9:58, he's calling you. My phone rang at 9:58 a.m. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 10:04. Then 10:11. Then 10:19. I was in a breakfast meeting with Iris and Constance at a quiet restaurant 4 blocks from my new office space, a beautifully renovated floor in a building on the west side that Iris had secured as part of our launch infrastructure. We were reviewing the onboarding schedule for the 3 confirmed clients and discussing hiring priorities for the first quarter. My phone buzzed a 5th time. Iris glanced at the screen. "Calloway?" she asked. "Yes." She picked up her coffee cup. "Let him leave a message." At 10:34 a.m., he left a voicemail. I played it at 11:15, after our meeting concluded, sitting alone in my new corner office with its clean white walls and its floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Hudson. His voice in the voicemail was something I had never heard before in 6 years of working for him. The confidence was gone. The performative authority. The particular tone of a man who has never had to ask because he has only ever been answered. What remained was something raw and unsteady. "Elena." A pause. "I think we need to talk. I think there's been a misunderstanding, about a lot of things. What happened Friday night, I want to explain. I want to talk about the clients, about the timing, I think there's a way to, I need you to call me back. Please. Please." I had worked for Richard Calloway for 6 years. I had heard him speak to CEOs, board members, investors, and journalists. I had heard him in negotiations. I had heard him in crisis. I had heard him at his most polished and his most exhausted. I had never once heard him say please. I set my phone down on my new desk and looked out at the Hudson, white and silver and entirely indifferent to the morning's events, and I sat with the feeling for a while before I decided what to do with it. I called him back at 2 p.m. Not because I owed him a conversation. I didn't. But because I had decided, somewhere between the voicemail and the view and the second cup of coffee, that I wanted to close this door cleanly. Not for him. For myself. He answered on the first ring. "Elena. Thank you for calling back." He stopped. Started again. "The clients. Hartley, Morrison, Chin Industries, they're saying they're following you to the new firm." "They are," I said. "For more have called this morning." "Elena, that's 40% of our revenue." "I know." A silence. "I need you to understand that what I said Friday." "I understood it perfectly," I said. "I think that's the problem you're having." Another silence. Longer this time. "What would it take," he said, his voice stripped now of every layer of performance, "to bring you back?" And there it was. I had imagined this moment in various forms across the 14 months of preparation. I had imagined feeling triumphant. I had imagined feeling angry, or sad, or some complicated mixture of both. I had even imagined, in weaker moments, feeling tempted. I felt none of those things. What I felt was the particular peace of a woman who has outgrown a room and is no longer pretending otherwise. "Richard," I said. "There is nothing. Not because I'm angry. Because I'm done." I paused. "You called me worthless in front of 47 people. But here's what I want you to really understand, not as a professional lesson, but as a human one." My voice was even. Quiet. "I was never worthless. I was the most valuable thing in that company. And you spent 6 years making sure I didn't know it." The silence on his end was absolute. "I hope the firm recovers," I said, and I meant it, Not for his sake but for the people who work there who deserve stability. I genuinely do. But that recovery won't involve me. I ended the call. 6 months later, Vasquez Strategic Partners had 11 clients, a team of 8, and a profile piece in a business magazine that Dara framed and mailed to me as a joke, and then as a genuine gift when I told her I actually wanted it. The piece focused on our client retention methodology and our expansion into sustainable brand strategy. The journalist, a careful writer named Patricia Osei, had asked near the end of our interview whether I felt I had anything to prove. I had thought about the question for a moment before answering. No, I had said. I think I spent a long time feeling like I had to prove something to people who had already decided who I was before I walked through the door. That's exhausting. What I feel now is not the need to prove anything, but the freedom to build something. And what are you building? Patricia had asked. Something worth building, I had said. A place where the people doing the work are the people getting the credit. That's it. That's the whole vision. She had smiled. Simple. Most important things are. Calloway and Associates filed for restructuring 8 months after I left. Richard, I heard through the industry network that now spoke openly about things it had once whispered, had lost 6 more clients in the months following my departure. Without the strategic infrastructure I had built, the methodology, the client relationships, the institutional knowledge that had lived primarily in me, the firm had struggled to deliver at the level its reputation had promised. I did not feel satisfied when I heard this. I want to be honest about that. I felt something more complicated. Something closer to sorrow than triumph, the particular grief of watching something fail that could have been different if one person had simply decided to see clearly. Marcus joined my team in month 4. He was the first hire I made who came from Calloway. He would not be the last. On his first day, he sat across from me in my office and said, with the slightly overwhelmed expression of someone adjusting to a reality that keeps exceeding their expectations, "This is nothing like over there." "What's different?" I asked. He thought about it. "Here, when something works, everyone knows who made it work." I nodded. "That should be obvious," he said. "It should be standard." "But it's not, is it?" "No," I said. "It's not. Which is exactly why we're going to make it ours." Outside the window, the Hudson moved the way it always moved, broad and quiet and completely unbothered by the smallness of the things happening along its edges. I had built something worth building in a room I had built myself. No one would ever mistake it for someone else's. And on the days when the work was hard and the decisions were heavy and the weight of building something real pressed against my chest in the early morning hours, I thought about a penthouse above Central Park and a shattered champagne flute and a smile that had said, quietly and with total certainty, "I know something you don't." I had known. And now, so did everyone else. Before you leave, if this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the invisible engine behind someone else's success, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you're on a journey of growth and rebuilding like Elena, I want to tell you about something that changed how I think: audiobooks. There's an exclusive deal waiting for you in the description, your first month completely free, with access to over 500,000 titles. The link is right below. Don't let it sit there. Use it.